Good afternoon, everybody. And today we are talking about Biology Chapter 7, which covers the cardiovascular system. So the first thing that we need to know is, the general structure of the heart. So your heart has four chambers, the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the left ventricle. And this is as if a person, this heart was in somebody. It would be their left, their right. So just make note of that as well. And so your blood comes in from the body, okay? Your deoxygenated blood comes in from the body and passes through the right atrium and the tricuspid valve, and then goes through your right ventricle and gets pumped to your lungs through your pulmonary valve so that you can exhale that deoxygenated blood carrying CO2. So once you do that, you have a new oxygenated blood carrying more oxygen coming from your lungs that needs to get to the rest of your body. So it goes through the left atrium, the bicuspid valve, and then it gets the left ventricle, and then gets pumped to the rest of your body through the aortic valve. And your aorta is up here, okay? So it's a very, very simplified way to look at the heart, and just remember the different chambers and the direction of blood flow. And so the sounds of the heart is also known as, a lot of people say it sounds like lub-dub, right? So that heartbeat is actually the lub, is the close of the tricuspid valve. And then you have the dub, the second part, is the close of the aortic and pulmonary valve. So that's lub-dub, boom, 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 boom. That's your heartbeat. So that's actually those valves closing to make sure that there's no backflow through the heart. So blood pressure is also important in this chapter. So 120/80 is a regular blood pressure, and that is systolic over diastolic, okay? So this is maintained by baroreceptors and chemoreceptors. So when your blood pressure is too low, we will definitely get into these hormones when we cover the endocrine system, as well as your kidney. However, just as a side note, if your blood pressure is too low, that is going to signal more ADH and more aldosterone, an increase in those hormones, and then an increase in blood osmolarity is going to cause an increase in ADH, okay? And so cardiac output is your heart rate times the stroke volume. That's just a good formula to know. And we also will talk about these pressures a little bit more as well, but the hydrostatic pressure is moves the fluid away and out of the blood vessels. And then the osmotic pressure is also known as the sucking pressure, that is drawing water back, okay? So that is our hydrostatic and osmotic pressure. Then we're going to come over here to our electrical conduction of the heart. And so your heart has cardiac autorhythmic cells, and this means that those cells can trigger their own action potentials, but they do not contract, okay? And so that, along with the pathway, the electrical conduction pathway of your heart, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit, and then we'll go into detail. So it starts with the SA node, which is also known as the pacemaker. Then you have your AV node. It travels to the bundle of His, and then to Purkinje fibers. And if you look up an image of this, it's very detailed and a little hard to draw just on a whiteboard. So I would really suggest Googling an image of the electrical conduction pathway of your heart so you can see what I'm referring to. But the reason that you'll kind of notice that it starts here, then it'll signal some things here and signal back up that way. And so the reason for that is that the atrial muscles cannot stimulate the ventricles on their own, which is why we need this electrical conduction pathway to stimulate that. Another reason that we have this electrical conduction pathway is that the AV node can delay just slightly the contractions so that the atria can contract first, okay? And then the third thing is the reason, as I said, if you look at an image, it will kind of start from the bottom and the impulse will travel to the top. And that is because our aorta, our exit point, is up at the top. So that is the reason for our electrical conduction pathway. And like I said, definitely Google an image of this and come back to these notes so you know what we're talking about. Important things to know for the heart as well is the arteries, which carry blood away and they have the ability to recoil. We have arterioles, which are small muscular arteries. We have the capillaries in the endothelial wall, which are responsible for the gas diffusion. And then you have veins that do not recoil but carry blood to your heart. And venules are small veins. Okay, so those are just important ones to know for the heart as well and for the circulatory system. Another important aspect of this chapter is blood. So blood, this is much simplified, but we will get into it in a later chapter. But just an overview is erythrocytes. Okay, your blood is composed of erythrocytes, which is your red blood cells, your leukocytes, which is your white blood cells, your platelets, which are also known as thrombocytes, and then 1% hematocrit. Okay, so as we continue on here, as we mentioned, so the cardiac action potential is a little bit different. I'm hoping you can see this. Let me move it. Move it a little closer. All right, so we're gonna look at this part right up here in the corner. So the cardiac action potential has a longer refractory period than a regular action potential, and this allows for less heart twitches, which is a good thing when it comes to your heart. It also has a longer than regular action potential. Okay, and this is because your heart has voltage-gated calcium channels. Okay, which we do not see when we're looking at regular action potentials, as we will get into another chapter. So that's just an important thing to note as well about the cardiac action potentials. The Bohr effect is a really big thing when we're talking about the respiratory and circulatory systems. Okay, so let me see if I can be over here. All right, so the Bohr effect basically is a way to understand how the oxygen travels through our body and how we are able to breathe out the CO2. So oxygen has a higher affinity to red blood cells in your lungs, okay? And that's where the pH is lower. So that is the case, so that when the blood is in your lungs, it can pick up as much oxygen as possible, okay? But as you're traveling through your body, you don't want your red blood cells to hold on to that oxygen, right? You want to deliver it to the rest of your body, which means throughout the rest of your body, the oxygen has a lower affinity to the red blood cells, and that in the rest of your body, your pH is slightly higher. And this also brings us to our point of cooperative binding. So the cooperative binding shows on a curve, it's a sinusoidal curve, and cooperative binding is basically when something first binds. As soon as that first one is bound, it's easier for the subsequent ones to bind. And we see that with oxygen and heme, as we see oxygen binding to the subunits of heme. So once the first one binds, it's a lot easier for the other ones to bind as well. And the last thing we're going to talk about in this chapter is blood type. So blood type is basically describing what antigens appear on the surface of your red blood cells. Okay, so you can have type A, type B, type AB, or type O blood. And so you can also have a plus or negative sign to your blood type. So B negative, AB positive, and those type of things. So that is given by the RH factor. And the RH factor, the RH plus is dominant. And this is just, telling of the presence or the absence of a specific protein that is being expressed. We don't hear about that as much, but that is what the RH factor does, and that is what the positive or negative categorization of the blood type actually is. And so if somebody has type A blood, they will have A antigens on the surface of their red blood cells, okay? And that means that their body will produce anti-A antibodies, okay? And so somebody with type A blood is able to donate to somebody with type A blood or somebody with type AB blood, okay? But that's it. And somebody with type A can receive blood from a person with blood type A or somebody with blood type O, because blood type O is the universal donor, so they are able to give blood to anybody. But other than that, it's very specific as to what blood type you can give and receive from. Mind you, the blood type O, if you have blood type O, you're only able to receive from other O donors, okay? But you can donate to everyone. So that's just an important note about blood type O. And we could do blood type, I'll do blood type AB as an example as well. So if you have blood type AB, this means that you produce antigens A and B. You will not produce any antibodies, and you would be able to donate to somebody with type AB blood only. But you would also be able to receive blood from somebody with type A, type B, type AB, or type O. Okay, so if you're blood type AB, that means you can receive blood from anybody with the other blood types as well. So those are just some, some examples of blood type, and hopefully you understand the circulatory system. If you have any questions, please leave them down below and stay tuned for our next chapter.